I thought I was his only wife, until I met his other children at his funeral. And the worst part? He left them everything, and left me with lies. My name is Claire, I'm 46, and this is the story of how I discovered that the man I loved lived a double life, one that didn't include me. I still remember the way the house smelled the day I got the call. It was Tuesday, laundry day, and I just sat down with a cup of chamomile tea and a half-folded pile of Eric's shirts. His favorite ones, too. You know, the ones with the little stitched initials on the cuffs. My phone rang, and when I saw the hospital's name flash on the screen, my stomach dropped. I knew. Before I even answered, I knew something was wrong. The nurse was kind. Too kind. She said Eric had collapsed in the parking lot of a hotel downtown and was pronounced dead on arrival. A heart attack, they said. Sudden. Unexpected. Just like that, my husband, the man I'd spent 2 decades building a life with, was gone. I didn't cry right away. I don't know why. I just sat there, numb, while my tea got cold and the washing machine beeped behind me like it didn't know the world had stopped. The next few days were a blur. Calling friends, booking the memorial, dealing with the paperwork. Our son, Matt, flew home from college. He kept asking if I was okay, and I kept lying and saying I was. I guess I was too busy surviving to feel anything real. But it was 3 days before the funeral when the first crack in my reality appeared. I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me to. A woman's voice, gentle but firm. Hi. I'm sorry to call like this, but I just wanted to ask, is it okay if we attend the service? My children and I. We'd like to pay our respects to Eric. There was silence on my end. I blinked a few times, unsure what I'd just heard. Who are you exactly? I asked, my voice colder than I meant. I was Eric's wife, she said. I know this is probably hard to hear, but I thought you should know. I wish I could say I dropped the phone in shock like in the movies. But no, I didn't drop it. I gripped it tighter. Wife? Another wife? Was this some twisted prank? Some cruel joke? But what she said next would shake everything. She continued, he told me you were just a business partner. He said your marriage was for tax reasons. But I always felt something was off. That was the moment everything around me shifted. The couch I was sitting on didn't feel like mine. The walls of my living room closed in. I couldn't breathe. What would you do if the man you trusted with your whole life had another one somewhere else? Tell me in the comments, would you go to the funeral still not knowing the whole truth? I was just lying there, staring at the wall, tracing cracks I'd never noticed before. The clock kept ticking, but I wasn't watching time. I was stuck, completely stuck on her words. I was Eric's wife. I must have replayed that call 100 times in my mind. Her voice. Her hesitation. That strange mix of grief and guilt. A part of me wanted to believe she was lying. That she was just confused or sick or something. But then there was this little voice inside me, you know, that awful whisper we all get? The one that says, you already know. You just don't want to believe it. Around 3 a.m., I think, I got out of bed and went straight to Eric's desk. I don't even remember walking there. It just happened. Like muscle memory. There was this drawer he always kept locked. Except, and I swear I'm not making this up, it was unlocked. Just waiting. Like it wanted me to open it. So I did. Inside were receipts. Not 1 or 2, but a whole bunch, hotel stays, flower deliveries, dinner bills. The dates? They weren't from years ago. Some were from last month. One was from the week before the accident. And then I saw it. A tiny envelope tucked under a tax folder. Eric's handwriting, I'd know it anywhere. It just said, for Melissa. Melissa. I froze. My fingers went numb. I opened it anyway, like I was watching someone else do it. There was a photo inside, Eric with a woman and 3 kids. All of them at a pumpkin patch, wearing matching flannel shirts, smiling like they were in a toothpaste commercial. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I dropped the photo. Or maybe I flung it, I honestly can't remember. What I do remember is sitting on the floor, just breathing. Shallow, panicked breaths like I'd run a marathon. How long had this been going on? How much of my life had been a lie? It's wild how quickly your brain flips. One minute you're grieving the love of your life, and the next you're wondering if he ever really loved you at all. In the morning, and I use that word loosely, because I never actually slept, I called the number back. Melissa picked up on the first ring. "I need to see you," I said. "In person." She didn't hesitate. "Okay, just tell me when." We met at this little coffee place I used to go to after yoga. I hadn't been there in years. I chose it because I thought maybe the familiarity would calm me down. Spoiler, it didn't. She walked in wearing this pale green cardigan and no makeup. Her eyes were puffy, not like mine, from no sleep, but like she'd been crying. A lot. "Claire," she asked, like she wasn't sure. I nodded. "Melissa?" We sat. No small talk. Just silence. Then I asked how long. She looked down, twisting her wedding ring. 13 years. I just blinked. 13. That meant he started this double life before our 10th anniversary. Have you ever had a moment where the floor disappears beneath you? Like you're falling, but you're sitting completely still? What would you have done? Would you have stayed to hear the rest? I don't remember ordering anything at that cafe. But there was a cup of chamomile tea in front of me. It just appeared. Maybe Melissa ordered it for me, or maybe one of us did out of habit. I didn't touch it. My hands were too busy gripping the edge of the table. She sat across from me, fidgeting with a paper napkin. Folding it, unfolding it, folding it again. Her fingers were shaking. 13 years. I said, trying not to sound broken. "He was married to you for 13 years? She nodded slowly. "I didn't know about you until a few days ago. After the accident, when his phone started ringing. Your name popped up. Claire, wife. That's when it hit me." I let out this short, bitter laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like either I laughed or I screamed. There was no in between. "He told me he was traveling for work," I muttered. "Conferences. Business trips. That's where he was, wasn't he? With you." Melissa nodded again. "He said the same to me. Sometimes he'd be gone for a weekend. Sometimes longer. I thought he was just busy. I mean, he was always charming, careful. Careful. God. That word hit me like a slap. Eric had been careful. Careful enough to juggle 2 wives, 2 homes, 2 entire lives, and neither of us had a clue. Melissa pulled something from her bag. A photo. She pushed it toward me like it was proof. Like I needed any more. It was Eric, younger, but unmistakably him, standing next to a woman in a white dress. A wedding. Their wedding. It looked real. Not like some Vegas one-night mistake. There were guests. Flowers. A cake. Her face glowed. "Where was this?" I asked. "Lake Tahoe," she said softly. "A small ceremony." He said his parents didn't approve of me, so it had to be private. I let that sink in. While I was home with our infant son, nursing and struggling through postpartum depression, he was, at a lake, saying vows to another woman. "I don't know how to feel," I said, my voice barely audible. "Angry. Humiliated. Mostly numb." She whispered, "Me too." We sat in silence again. It was the weirdest kind of grief, like mourning a man we both loved, but neither of us really knew. I finally asked the question that had been clawing at me all night. "Did he have kids with you?" Her eyes darted to her purse again. "Yes. 3. I felt my stomach twist. Not because I didn't expect it, I did. But because hearing her say it out loud made it real. So painfully real. "Are they his biologically?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes. All of them. 3 kids. I had 1 son with Eric. He had 4 children. And none of them knew about each other." I suddenly remembered his comment last year when I suggested we have another baby. He'd said, "I think we're good with 1. Let's not complicate things." God. It made sense now. He already had enough complications. "Why are you telling me all this?" I finally asked. "Why no?" Her voice cracked. "Because I found out something else." She reached into her purse one more time and pulled out a folded letter. "I think you should read this." I found it in his briefcase. It was addressed to you. She slid it across the table. I stared at it. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Would you have opened it right then and there? Or would you have needed a moment, or 100? I took the letter home. I don't know why I didn't open it at the cafe. Maybe because I didn't want Melissa to see me fall apart. Or maybe I was just afraid. Afraid that the last shred of my reality would shatter for good. I sat on the edge of my bed for over an hour with it in my hands. The house was quiet, too quiet. My son, Josh, was at a sleepover. Thank God. I don't think I could have held myself together if he'd been home. The envelope was thick, the paper heavy. Eric had written my name on the front in his usual neat handwriting. Claire. Nothing else. No, my love, no to my wife. Just Claire. When I finally tore it open, my hands were trembling so badly I almost ripped the page inside. Claire. If you're reading this, then I didn't make it. My heart stopped. God, I hated him for starting it like that. There's so much I never told you. I want to say I'm sorry, but I know that word won't even begin to cover the mess I've made of your life. He went on. He explained how he'd met Melissa years before we got married. Said it was never supposed to go as far as it did. That he tried to end it so many times, but always got pulled back in. That he loved us both in different ways. What does that even mean? How do you love two people and lie to both of them for over a decade? He talked about how he compartmentalized. How he kept calendars, separate bank accounts, 2 phones. It read like a confession and a how-to manual for betrayal at the same time. And then he wrote something I still can't wrap my head around. I was planning to come clean. I swear. After the holidays, I was going to tell you everything. I wanted to end things with Melissa and be a real husband to you and Josh. I had a ring. I was going to repropose. I blinked. A ring? Repropose? I looked around the room, our room, and suddenly it all felt foreign. Like someone else had lived this life. Not me. He ended the letter with something I'll never forget. Please don't hate Melissa. She didn't know. I was the coward. And I'm sorry I never gave you the life you deserved. That was it. No signature. Just a blank space where his name should have been. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back into the envelope, like sealing it would somehow contain the ache. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to go to work. I called in sick. Honestly, I felt sick. Like my body was rejecting the truth. I spent the day on the couch, staring at old photos. Vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, all with Eric smiling next to me, like nothing was wrong. And maybe that was the worst part. The lies weren't just in the shadows. They were standing right beside me in every happy memory. That evening, Melissa texted, "Can we talk again? I think there's something else you should know." Something else? I don't know how much more I could take. But I said yes. She came over. Not to the cafe this time, my house. The house I'd shared with Eric. The house where she had probably never stepped foot until that day. Melissa sat across from me in the living room, her hands tucked tightly between her knees. She looked even more pale than before. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept. And then she said it. "Claire, I think Eric may have been hiding more than just us. I think he was hiding money. A lot of it." I stared at her like she'd just spoken in another language. "Money?" I asked, my voice low, cautious. "What are you talking about?" Melissa nodded slowly. I didn't want to believe it at first. I told myself it was just paranoia. But I've been going through some of his things, old texts, emails. And Claire, he had accounts. Offshore accounts. I felt like the floor under me was shifting. Offshore accounts? Eric? The man who once freaked out over a $50 overdraft fee? I rubbed my temples. This is insane. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. I printed some of it out. I thought maybe you'd recognize something. Inside were several statements. Account numbers. Bank names I didn't recognize. Transactions. Dates. Amounts that made my stomach flip. $18,000, $36, 000, even $112,000 at one point. My hands were ice cold. Where did he get this kind of money? Melissa looked at me, her lips pressed together. That's the part I'm afraid of. I think he was taking it from somewhere he shouldn't have. I think it might have been illegal. You know when something clicks into place and suddenly the pieces you never knew were missing just align? That letter, the way he was acting toward the end, the extra nights at work, the mysterious investments he wouldn't explain. It was like my whole life had been a stage, and I just discovered the script. I need to call someone, I muttered. A lawyer, or the police, or God, I don't even know. Melissa didn't say anything. She just sat there, still, like she was trying to breathe without making a sound. I stood up, pacing. Did you ever ask him where it came from? Did he ever explain? She nodded weakly. Once. He said he was helping a friend with real estate. But when I asked to see paperwork, he got defensive. Said I didn't trust him. I let out a bitter laugh. He used that line on me too. I should have seen it. Should have known. That night, after Melissa left, I didn't sleep. I sat up at the kitchen table with every folder, every bank statement, every piece of paper I could find with Eric's name on it. I searched emails, bank apps, old drawers. I even dug through the back of the closet where he used to keep his golf bag. And that's when I found it. A flash drive, taped under a shoebox. I stared at it like it might explode. It felt heavy in my hand, like it was holding answers I wasn't ready for. Plugging it into my laptop, I whispered, Please, Eric. Let this be nothing. Let me be wrong. But of course I wasn't. Inside were files. Spreadsheets. Ledger names. Names I didn't recognize. Transactions dated back over 7 years. Some tied to shell companies. Others labeled consulting fees. None of it made any sense, and yet all of it did. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was living a double life in every way possible. I leaned back in my chair, numb. And here's the worst part, somewhere deep down, I think a part of me already knew. Not the details, not the money, not the extent, but something. Something had been off for a long time. And I'd chosen to ignore it. Have you ever done that? Seen the signs and looked the other way because the truth was just too heavy? Tell me in the comments. Would you have opened the drive? Or walked away and never looked back? The sound of the dishwasher finishing its cycle snapped me out of my trance. I had been sitting at the kitchen table for, I don't know how long, just staring at the open laptop. The files. The numbers. The names. They all looked so official, so sterile. And yet, they felt like tiny grenades, ready to destroy what was left of my life. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and stood up. My back hurt. My legs tingled from being still too long. I needed air. I opened the back door and stepped outside into the crisp evening. The neighbors' wind chimes were playing their soft metallic tune, and the smell of someone's barbecue drifted faintly through the air. I remember thinking, how can everything look so normal? Eric's secret life was now sitting on a flash drive no bigger than my thumb, and yet here I was, watching the sunset like nothing had changed. Only everything had. That night, I called my sister Rachel and asked her to come over early the next day. I didn't tell her why. I couldn't, not over the phone. When she walked through the door the next morning, carrying her usual oat milk latte, she took one look at me and set it down slowly. What's wrong? I didn't even answer. I handed her the flash drive, opened the folder, and waited. Watching her read through the documents was like watching someone unravel a knot they didn't know existed. Her expression changed with every file: confusion, concern, disbelief, and then fear. Claire, what the hell is this? I exhaled slowly. It's Eric's. All of it. He had it stored in a hidden folder on his personal drive. I only found it by accident. She looked up, her mouth slightly open. You think this is illegal? I don't know what I think, I said. But it doesn't feel innocent. Rachel leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. Okay, you need help. Not just emotional. Legal. I already knew that. I had barely slept, thinking of the worst-case scenarios. Frozen accounts. IRS investigations. Maybe even being blamed for something I didn't do. My name was on some of those accounts. I was married to him. What if that made me complicit? I looked Rachel in the eye. I need a lawyer. And fast. She made some calls. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting across from Lisa Hargrove, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who'd apparently handled a few high-profile financial cases. She studied the files in silence, tapping her pen against the edge of her desk. Then she looked up. If what you're showing me is real, Claire, this is money laundering. Possibly worse. My chest tightened. Can they come after me? If any of it passed through accounts with your name on them, yes. At the very least, you'll be investigated. Do you have proof that you didn't know? I didn't even know the accounts existed. She nodded, scribbling notes. Then we need to start building a wall around you. Now. My head buzzed. It was like being in a dream where nothing makes sense, but everything feels urgent. My hands were cold. My mouth was dry. I barely heard the rest of what she said, something about freezing assets, documenting communication, preparing for questions I didn't want to answer. On the drive home, I kept hearing Eric's voice in my head. Not the angry voice or the tired one. Just his regular voice. The one that used to say, "I love you. Trust me. Trust." God, what a joke. You know that feeling? When you find out someone you trusted with your whole life was living a second one behind your back. What would you do if your late husband's secret could destroy your future? Would you risk everything to bring the truth into the light? Let me know in the comments. Would you have gone to the authorities? Or stayed silent to protect yourself? I didn't go straight home after that meeting with Lisa. Instead, I drove to a tiny parking lot near the Riverwalk. It's where Eric and I had gone for walks when we were first dating. I don't even know why I ended up there. Maybe I just needed to see something from the old days, before all this mess. Before all the lies. I sat in the car, watching a couple walk their golden retriever, and I wondered how many other people were walking around with secrets like mine. I wondered how many women smiled at their neighbors in the morning, poured cereal for their kids, and carried the weight of something unspeakable. The next few days were chaotic. Lisa helped me get things moving, freezing the accounts Eric had used, drafting a letter to the bank, contacting a forensic accountant. Every time I signed a document, I felt like I was erasing another part of my old life. Every legal move was a small goodbye to the Claire I used to be. Then came the funeral. It was strange, attending a service for a man I no longer recognized. Everyone came, his coworkers, old friends, even his sister from Colorado, who sobbed through her eulogy like she was mourning the most perfect brother in the world. No one knew. No one had the slightest clue. I stood there, frozen in place, while people hugged me and whispered how sorry they were. I thanked them. I nodded. I smiled like I was supposed to. But inside, I was screaming. There was a moment during the service, just one, that nearly broke me. The pastor said, Eric was a man of integrity, a devoted husband, a loyal friend. I wanted to stand up and shout, "You didn't know him." Not really. But I didn't. I just closed my eyes and swallowed the scream. Later that night, after the house was finally quiet and the casseroles were put away, I sat at the dining room table with a glass of wine. I turned Eric's wedding ring over in my palm, the same one they gave me from the hospital. And I said out loud, maybe to him, maybe to the universe, "You didn't get away with it." I don't know why I said that. Maybe because I needed to reclaim something. My power. My voice. My truth. Even if the world would never know the real Eric, I did. And I wasn't going to let that truth rot inside me like some secret shame. Lisa told me we were close to finalizing the report. Once the investigation was complete, I'd decide what to do with it. Maybe submit it to the authorities. Maybe just file it away, a sealed chapter of my life. Either way, I was going to take back control. I had even started journaling again. Not for anyone else, just for me. The first page was shaky, but it felt good. Like an exhale I hadn't realized I was holding. And I started doing small things that reminded me I was still alive. I bought myself tulips from Trader Joe's. I went to yoga, even though I cried halfway through the class. I sat at a little cafe with a latte and watched strangers pass by, letting myself imagine new beginnings. Grief and betrayal, they're messy. They don't follow a schedule. One day I felt strong. The next, I could barely get out of bed. But with every sunrise, I felt a little more like myself. Whoever that was going to be now. And here's the truth. I didn't get closure. Not really. But I did get clarity. And sometimes, that's enough. Some mornings, I still expect to hear Eric humming in the kitchen. I think grief does that, it plays tricks on your senses. But then I remind myself, the man I thought I knew, he never really existed. I've stopped asking why he did it. Why he hid so much. Why he left me to clean up the mess. There are no answers that make it easier. No explanation that brings peace. What I do know is this: I survived it. Not just the shock or the lies, but the doubt, the silence, the shame. I stood in the wreckage of a life I thought I had, and I built something new from it. And honestly, that version of me, the one who kept going, she's someone I've grown to admire. I don't tell many people the full story. It's not something you drop into casual conversation. But every time I meet another woman carrying secrets behind her smile, I think, maybe she needs to hear mine. Because we don't talk enough about what happens when the person we love the most turns out to be a stranger. We don't talk about the quiet strength it takes to keep living. So here I am, still standing, still healing. And maybe that's the whole point. If you've walked through your own storms and came out stronger, or if you're still fighting, you're not alone. Subscribe to hear more stories from women like us, women who refuse to stay down.